Welcome to AwesomeDOT, your dedicated guide to the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem. All content is thoughtfully curated for educational and informational purposes. We ensure that our resources reflect the latest developments and insights. We prioritize your knowledge without offering financial advice or endorsing the buying, selling, or holding of tokens. The opinions and resources shared are those of the respective contributors and do not reflect the official stance of AwesomeDOT. Trust in your discretion for all financial decisions inspired by our content.
So hello everyone, welcome to the 8th episode of the AwesomeDOT Podcast. I'm your host Yogesh, and today we are joined by Richard from the Xcavate team. Richard is a serial entrepreneur and has over 12 years experience in technology. He has been working in blockchain for the past 5 years, and he's currently the CTO of Xcavate, building a democratized platform for property investments, if I'm getting that right. And so welcome to the podcast, Richard.
Hey, Yogesh. Hello, everyone. Nice to be on. Thanks for having me.
Great. Awesome. So, I found your resume quite interesting in that sense. So I want to start off with a bit of background and just try to understand. So how did you first get into crypto itself?
So it's quite a while ago because I've got a Web 2 background, and one of my Web 2 clients was buying a lot of Bitcoin, some XRP, Ethereum, and he was waxing lyrical about how amazing this technology was, and I never even heard of it. So this was back in 2015. Obviously, the price of Bitcoin was a lot lower than it was now, so I should have piled in, but regret is probably some appeal that we've all swallowed at some stage. So I didn't invest, but I did investigate the technology, and I went down that rabbit hole, and it led me to understand a bit more about Ethereum, although I haven't really stayed in that environment. I sort of looked at what Gavin Wood had done at Ethereum, and I was intrigued by what he was looking to do at Polkadot. And sort of going back to maybe 2018, it was the very, very start of when they were sort of starting in Berlin and looking. I think they had a
Web3 Foundation. Yeah, the Web3 Foundation just started 2018.
Yeah, exactly. So they had this away holiday in Ibiza, I think it was, and like they were sort of sketching out what they were going to do with Polkadot, and I was just really intrigued. And I thought, if there's going to be a protocol that brings everything together, it's the idea of this chain of chains, and the interoperability element really drew me in because I've been reading a book called Blockchain Revolution by Alan and Dan Tapscott, and that really looked at how real world assets could be tokenized. And coming from a largely real world sort of environment, I had one foot firmly planted in that arena. So I originally had an idea for an art gallery that could be like you'd have art, like NFT artists, and they would be presenting their art in hotels and other large spaces, and then most of the sort of revenues would go to the artist, because with digital art, a lot of the times the artist actually doesn't get a lot of money. It's a bit like the music industry. So I wanted to try and revolutionize that. But there were some really, really good projects in that field. And the more I researched it, the more I realized that I was a little bit late into that arena. But that was about the same time as I had a chat with my co-founder, Alex, who's been in real estate for 20, 23, 24 years, and really understands that space. So that was where we looked at the idea of tokenizing real estate, but then fractionalizing and making it a really easy and simple asset to own and to trade, which traditionally it's been one of those assets either just out of reach for the average person or very difficult to invest in different parts of the world because it's so complex and requires so many trusted entities and intermediaries.
Makes sense. So So then, if that's the case, you have been involved in the Polkadot ecosystem sort of quite early. So what was like that early development like, right? So
I was quite a voyeur for quite a while because I think coming from a Web 2 background, the sort of the complexity of Web 3 was a little bit daunting, if I'm honest, and I didn't want to. I think you don't want to make a mistake. So I sort of looked. I thought about outsourcing most of the development initially, and we got in touch with a couple of agencies and had various discussions and sketched out like a tech stack and a bit of an understanding of how we thought the system could work. But it was also about the same time that I reached out to Ingo Rube from Kilt's protocol because I knew that digital identity was going to be a big factor in tokenizing real estate. And he said, you don't want to be outsourcing anything. You want to be, learning as you go. Take the pill of upset in terms of like the learning process. You need to really pull it apart, build it from scratch, build a team from scratch, and just work through the pain elements because it is very painful, and it was painful, but it was worth all the pain. It's one of those journeys that I look back and think, wow, it started sort of 3.5 years ago in earnest, and then like over that period of time, we've done all sorts, and we've launched. Just recently, we've launched an instance on Passio, the testnet for Polkadot. So yeah, it's been a huge journey, and I'll go through each lump and bump and hurdle that we encountered because looking out from outside the ecosystem, it's very, very easy for people to think it's not a place to start building because it is so complex. But I think you've just got to take one step at a time, have a plan, have an understanding of what you want to build, and then just break it down into manageable chunks. And that's exactly what we did.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, because there are a lot of moving parts essentially as an ecosystem in Polkadot, right? And that's what my next question was. Why choose Polkadot then? Like, because there were, as you said, you were exploring Ethereum and other chains, and things were much easier essentially developing on other chains. So what motivated you to stick to Polkadot?
It was gonna be about the complexity of the asset meant that we needed to try and abstract that complexity out. And interoperability was going to be key to that abstraction. So the only way of doing that was going to be to have like a focus on the digital identity, which Kilt were already doing an amazing job there. So there's no point in reinventing that element. And a lot of other chains were trying to control every element of the process. And we went the other way. We went, if we don't control anything and all we're about is verification of the asset prior to the minting and then tokenization and fractionalization, then it's got more chance of scalability. And it was always about trying to decentralize everything completely and make sure that it's as scalable as possible in any environment, in any region in the world, but in a regulatory fashion. So that was our goal. And none of the other ecosystems out there had the ability to deliver that in a modular way, apart from Polkadot. So that's why we chose Polkadot.
Nice, interesting. So this is actually great, and I want to steer the conversation a bit about your history background and how are you seeing things evolve there from a decentralized sense, right? Adidas is sort of doing its own thing, and so do you see that change happening, which wasn't there like early 2015, 2016, where decentralized sort of strategies were not even discussed? Do you see that changing now?
Definitely, and I see Polkadot as leading the way in that term. I do think that it's not a smooth journey, and we've had some issues with the biggest DAO in the world. It's fantastic that every community member has a say, and can vote on referendum. But I think, like with every sort of new system, we need to sort of bed it in over time. And the Parity were an amazing sort of forerunner in terms of sort of technical know-how and helping us build this system. But the handover last year to a fully decentralized treasury and sort of a governance system was sort of one of those things where I don't know if anyone actually realised how complex a process it was until it's sort of up and running. And I think because the treasury needs to focus in lots of different areas, not just tooling and different kinds of things that can make the ecosystem richer, but it needs to be things that are tangible that can help deliver enterprise and government solutions. I mean, we've got some amazing projects throughout the ecosystem now, and the number of chains is growing, ever increasing week by week and month by month. And I think the way that not only the decentralization has grown, but also the way in which we've pivoted as an ecosystem. So the parachain model, whilst I totally bought into the idea of the parachain, when you actually are in the ecosystem and you're building, one of the biggest barriers to launching is obviously getting enough finance to build what you're trying to build, and also building the community and everything else. So there's lots of different things to focus on. And if you've got to try and lock in X number of DOT for a period of 2 years, it was quite a big barrier. And it was also a barrier for smaller projects that maybe weren't as ambitious as some of the sort of the larger chains that were focused on a single use case. So I think the pivot really worked well over the last sort of 6 to 9 months. And I'm really excited by what's going on in the future in regard to Jam. And I think, going back to your previous question about different ecosystems, I think Jam will be the answer to everything, because it will bring all the ecosystems together. It'll be scalable. So it's definitely, I think 2 or 3 years away realistically, because at the end of the day, it might get off the ground in about 18 months, but it will need to bed in like everything else. So I think we've got enough of an ecosystem and enough stability in the ecosystem to grow in the next 2 or 3 years to then embrace Jam as the future.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, we have had a lot of discussions around Jam and async backing and how things are sort of moving in a direction where they are very, very scalable, modular, but also come with a lot of changes that you have to do. Like, you have to there is a lot of work to keep up with everything that's happening. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I mean, we've been really lucky. We've sort of secured some fantastic partnerships and collaborations. So from a digital identity point of view, I've talked about Kilt. From like a modular or a mobile Oracle network, we've teamed up with the likes of Accurast. So, because one of the things that's very important from a real world asset point of view is knowing who owns that asset, and also about the price of that asset. So we've spent a lot of time looking at how we can decentralize that sort of the gathering of that data. So it means that any sort of potential investor has confidence in the asset, and it's not either made up or centrally controlled, which could lead to market manipulation. So that was an important thing. We've also looked at the whole idea of decentralized data storage, so you don't bloat the chain. So we partner with the likes of Crust Network, because I love the idea of, if you imagine each individual property, all of the documentation relating to that property should be in an individual bucket that is sort of reviewed and controlled by all of the different token holders relating to that specific investment. So that we spend a lot of time sort of working with our partners and organising that structure. And that's an iterative process, so that won't happen overnight. And we spent a lot of time making mistakes, building things out, trying things out, testing it. And another partnership that has allowed us to deliver the test net so quickly is the partnership with Tansy. So the guys regarding the sort of Moonbase Alpha chain that's out there, we've spun up a number of different app chains. We've even spun up a game on one of their app chains, and we couldn't have done that without their support, and that's been invaluable. So that's a really big. If anyone's looking to sort of try out building an app chain and they're not quite sort of sure about how to go about it, I'd recommend reaching out to the Tansy network, because they're a fantastic team first and foremost, and the technology's there that really allows you to spin something up, test the environment, make mistakes in a very safe safe way, but also a way that you can still update without having to fork your blockchain. So that's another reason we chose Polkadot, is that you can forklessly upgrade. We're using a number of custom palettes that we've created, as well as a number of the existing palettes within the network. So it allows us to spin up a number of different assets, as well as the NFTs themselves. And then what we've also done is we've looked at we want the big vision. We've built this sort of foundational protocol. So from a foundational point of view, we can give any sort of potential investor confidence that there's a point of truth regarding any asset, which I think is fundamental. And then we can build marketplaces on top of this fundamental sort of foundational protocol that are regulatory compliant, and then they could service different regions or be spun up by different operators. But what we wanted to do was create that whole process from start to finish, prove the concepts, and then we'll build out like an SDK that other operators can then build upon, and other partners, because I think it's the biggest asset class in the world, and we want to make it as inclusive as possible, and go to regions around the world where trust is not necessarily easy to come by, and maybe at a different stage of the investment process, different entities might manipulate the situation. We wanted to make sure that wasn't possible with our protocol, so that's where sort of we're heading eventually. But it's a very modular and sort of step-by-step process that we've taken, and we're about halfway through our sort of goals, but it's going very much in the right direction, and we're very excited about what we're doing in the next few months as well.
Very interesting. And there are not a lot of cases where you see so much dog fooding happening in the ecosystem, right? So you've purposely decided to sort of go to different players in the ecosystem and integrate with them, right? So how has that experience been, and would you recommend this for other people who are trying to build?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's a number of things that I would recommend. I mean, one of the biggest things that really helped us was I was lucky enough to attend the Polkadot Blockchain Academy in Berkeley in America. I mean, it was an amazing experience to be immersed in the Polkadot ecosystem, understand the history of how Polkadot was developed, all of the theories behind, game theory and tokenomics and everything else that goes into it, from the people that actually developed the system. But more than that was some of the mentors that were providing the presentations were actually builders in the ecosystem and founders and other people involved, and that network has been invaluable. And I've built on that over time, and I've been lucky enough to attend the Web3 Summit recently in Berlin, and I got a chance to present our project, because we're lucky enough to receive a decentralized futures grant. So we've been building out some of our custom palettes with the support of the decentralized futures grant. And all of those contacts, again, were within the ecosystem over the last sort of 2 or 3 years. So I think that's been invaluable. I think also when going to events and various other things, for me, if I can support other projects, then it doesn't matter whether they directly support me back, but it's just I'm a believer in sort of givers gain. So what you put out into the ecosystem eventually is going to make everyone flourish. So I think the stronger we build these connections and partnerships and collaborations across all different elements, you might not see that there's an obvious benefit to a partnership, but I think you can sort of grow it over time and understand what you can give other people's projects, and then I just think it's a much more a positive outlook if everyone sort of thinks in those sort of terms. And I think Web3, that's what I love about Web3. It's a collaborative approach to building, not necessarily the silo approach that Web2 has become. I think so. That's the most the most important thing in my mind about building those relationships. It's about having the right approach, having the right mentality, and not just thinking of your own project. It's about the wider ecosystem and how you fit in and how you can benefit everyone.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So I want to dive into Xcavate a bit now, right? So what exactly is the problem that you're trying to solve?
So when I met my co-founder Alex, there were two main problems that he said were in the ecosystem or in the real estate market, especially in the UK, because that's where we're from. One of those was easy access to build finance, and mainly for the small to medium sized real estate developers. And they're the ones that integrate into communities. They build smaller types of developments, so from sort of the 1, 2, 3 apartment blocks to maybe 50, 60 apartment blocks. That's where we saw the need for the real estate or the easy finance access to build finance. So that was one element that we wanted to try and make it easier. The reason it's so complex is third parties like banks. Most real estate developers don't like dealing with banks because it takes up to 18 months to get loans secured. They have to jump through so many hoops to secure that build finance, and they're often charged at every stage of that process. And then the banks can turn around and change the goalposts, and they can add or change the APR that they're charging the real estate developer, and that completely changes the feasibility of some of the builds that they're trying to achieve. And small to medium sized developers can't have that uncertainty. So I love the idea of more of a community way of people getting involved with early stage developments, and also it's about people buying into their community as well. I love the idea of that. So that was one element, and the other element is more of a personal thing. I think my sister back in 2015, she became homeless, ended up in a halfway house because she got priced out of the market. She'd been renting for many years, but didn't actually manage to get on the property ladder. So the idea of a community of collective investment without the trust element. So many people can invest in a single property with fractions, and then build fractions over time or invest in different properties, and then they spread the risk over different regions or different properties in the same region. It really depends what their investment goals are. But I think with a lot of young people now, they want to travel, they want to do different things. They don't necessarily want to be in one place. So if you've got an ability to save in real estate, and leverage that over time and eventually buy your own place or just offset your rental in one region by having all of these investments in other regions, it becomes a very fluid and very liquid asset rather than this be the very complex and sort of in state very illiquid asset that it's traditionally been. I think that was what we were trying to achieve with our original goals. But from then, it's actually developed a lot further. So we want to look at the asset from land acquisition, because even before you start building, land assets have a certain kind of sort of structure. So the idea behind sort of key aspects of an asset, I sort of struck parallels with the idea of a digital identity. So you would create an identity for yourself. So there will be this digital identifier, which will be like a sort of abstract version of your identity, and then you'd add various different credentials. So your passport and your driving license and your address and phone number, email address. I see a digital asset, a real estate asset like land, in exactly the same way. That the land itself, the location of the lands, the type of land it is, the amount of land, all of those elements, the price of the land, though all those things are just attributes to that land. So we've sort of built a system where any asset can then be broken down into its attributes, and then those attributes can be verified. But then you take that to the planning stage. So once the piece of land then has planning access, that makes the land more valuable. And then also by streamlining the planning process, and we're sort of looking at elements how to do that, we can then reduce the amount of time it takes to plan, and then the construction process, and then the management of the finished properties. So from cradle to grave, the whole process behind newly built real estate projects. That's what we're trying to build, and then you can take that out to rental properties, commercial properties, university dwellings, campus, etc. You could have someone tokenize a room in a university campus. The parents buy that for a period of time and then sell that on to other parents. So I think the whole idea behind a tokenized economy with real estate could be amazing, and that's why we've chosen to focus very heavily just purely on real estate assets rather than the whole real world assets, because it's such a broad spectrum. I think it's a big enough niche in the real estate space to focus on that and deliver that asset much better than anyone else out there. And I think that's the nirvana. That's what we're trying to achieve eventually.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really great, kind of utopian in that sense, because there are a lot of, the minute you dive into land or anything, you are under the federal structure in that sense. So there are a lot of legalities that come with all of these that are based in the country itself. So how do you plan on sort of navigating those challenges that come along with land ownership and building ownership and everything?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good question. And I mean, the first thing we've done is we've applied to the FCA sandbox in the UK. So the FCA is similar to the SEC in the United States. We wanted to engage quite early on with the FCA and make sure that we were operating in a fully regulatory manner. But the beauty of the sandbox is that we can operate in a restricted license environment for a period of 6 months, potentially extend that, because the operating license is for things like a collective investment scheme, where if you take an asset, you tokenize that asset, and then you fractionalize it, you create what's called a collective investment scheme. And what we're effectively doing with the marketplace on top of the foundational protocol is we're creating this brokerage between the real estate developers and the investors. So whilst we're decentralized, in the eyes of the regulator, you still need certain fundamentals, things like the KYC, the AML, and everything that goes with it. So we wanted to ensure that the regulators were happy with the structure that we're implementing in the UK first, and then we'll roll out that process for other regulatory regions around the world.
Got it. So in that sense, because you are also sort of connected to multiple players, right? You mentioned you're using Kilt for digital identity. Like, does it also sort of cause a bit of concern uh, depending on a third party for legal requirements? Like, is that a concern that you are worried about?
Not at all. So what we've done is the actual protocol looks at digital identity in terms of the W3C standard. It just happens that Kilt are using the W3C standard. So any operator that has that standard and is operating to that standard, we could partner with them going forward. So it's just that we've had a good relationship with Kilt. We're actually testing at the moment the DIP palette, so we can verify DIDs that have been created on the Kilt protocol. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to be responsible for the creation of the digital identity or the credentials that go with it. We just want to be able to verify on our chain that those are real digital identities with fully verified KYC and other aspects of that identity. So they're a real person. They're not in a restricted region, or they're on some sort of watch list, because we can't get in trouble with the regulators. We want to make sure that everything is above board. But going to, in terms of the other side, the storage element, that's the same thing for the Crust partnership. So Crust is a storage chain. However, they are operating to IPFS standards. So, any other chain, Filecoin and things like that, we could interact with and be interoperable. I mean, going forward, we'd love to be Ethereum, compatible. We can look at changing our chain going forward, but we want to get to market. We want to prove the concept. We want to do all of that as quickly as possible. And then that's the beauty of Polkadot. We can refine and change and upgrade our chain faultlessly and create new custom palettes that we could implement new elements of our protocol in a fairly easy manner, in a fully tested environment. So it's been very important to have that sort of Tansy testnet, now the Passio testnet, before we do launch a full parachain on Polkadot using Agile Core Time. That's our next goal after we've launched on where we're doing a crowdfund funding on the Polymech platform soon. So the idea is that we want to obviously secure a bit of funding to enable us to have some runway for the next 6 months. And secure these regulatory licenses. So all of it, it's a step-by-step process, and we're trying to do everything in the right manner and fully test it. We've just had a really interesting. So SR Labs did an initial audit of our custom palettes, and we're just going through another audit or a review with BlockDeep. So to make sure that our custom palette code is fully rigorous and tested. Again, it's all those sort of brilliant entities within the Polkadot ecosystem that we're taking advantage of. There's the Alpha program, which is really helpful in terms of if you're building in the ecosystem. We've got X-Parity team that are supporting us in that respect with the Alpha program. And that's really great because you get an opportunity to speak to other teams, and then you go through the process of sharing where you are in your projects and any sort of pain points that you've overcome, and that way other teams are benefiting from the journey that you've undertaken and how you've overcome lots of different pain points, because it's just about how you overcome these friction points. And we know that wallets and everything else are a little bit clunky at the moment. I mean, there are some amazing wallets out there, but Web3 is, the UI, we all know that that's a bit of a pain point, especially bringing new users from Web2. We need to try and abstract all of that process out. So we're actually doing some testing with another potential partner, Interstellar, which will happen in the coming weeks. We're very, very excited about what's happening and how we're bringing something very tangible and real into the ecosystem, because I think it's much needed. There's some superb projects that are reaching out, like Mandala Chain, into the Indonesian government. We've had conversations with them about how we can leverage our protocol and their protocol and sort of build stuff together. Archisnal is another project that we're very closely aligned with, because architectural drawings and the whole sort of construction and engineering process, it's going to be key to how we deliver our projects. So there's no point in us trying to compete and build alongside others. We might as well just collaborate and join and get the best out of each other.
It's a way bigger problem for one person to solve. Knowing that.
Exactly.
True. Yeah. So this also so from what I see, there is a lot of real world data that you need at all times, like for this to actually work. So how are you sort of structuring that sort of data ingestion, and how is that Oracle sort of working for Xcavate?
Yeah, great question. So the way we see it working is threefold. So we do the verification checks to the digital identity and the KYC credentials, whilst at the same time we check the ownership of the asset itself through an oracle that goes to the land registry. We also do a check on the planning permissions associated with any build. So there's a unique code that a specific region will approve. So the planning status we can check through an Accurast oracle. So we've sort of developed this unique algorithm that looks at other similar properties within the region as well, and defines like a lower and an upper band. If you imagine a real estate developer that's built maybe 9 apartments, they will state that each apartment might be worth £300,000 or dollars, depending where you are. How do we know that's the amount that it's really worth? So what we've developed is an algorithm that can look at other similar properties in a decentralized way, not reliant on centralized information. And if that asset price is within the lower and the upper band, because it's quite subjective, it's never going to be exact, then the real estate developer is allowed to mint and fractionalize that asset and list that asset on the marketplace. I think that was quite fundamental in our thinking, because if you look at the way other marketplaces work, they're all very driven by a centralized entity saying, okay, this is a really good real estate asset to buy. We wanted to get away from that. We wanted to make sure that it was a completely decentralized way of approaching a marketplace, that we weren't recommending these developers or these properties, because we've got an idea, we've got experience about a market, but the fundamental part of any market is there's choice, there's data, it's all data driven rather than it sort of be centralized, and an entity that recommends these for purchasing. That's not what we're about. We're about making sure that there's enough data that someone can make an informed decision that it's the right kind of asset for their goals, their investment goals. That was where we were driven by. It was all about data and decentralization. And we've actually developed something I don't believe any other sort of real estate investment platform has developed, is a way of making each investment collective a DAO. So the way it works, if you imagine the real estate developer has built this nine apartment block. Maybe they've sort of sold a number of those in the sort of the usual way through an estate agent, and then they're looking to expand into a more international market. So they've listed these properties on the real, we're calling it Real X market, and then each property would be fractionalized, so the NFT itself would be locked, and then there would be fungible tokens which would represent fractions of the NFT, this property. But the actual property itself, from a regulatory point of view, is owned by it's called an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, which is like a limited company in the region where the property is. And then each token holder is a fractional owner of that SPV, which then owns the property. So there's a direct link, a legal link to that property and the title deed of the property. So let's say there was 100 fractions, 100 tokens. So you've got up to 100 different owners of that particular property. They would pay in USDT or USDC £3,000 for each token, plus like a 1% fee, which would cover all of the expenses. And then once all of the tokens have been sold, so if all of the tokens haven't been sold within a set period of say 30 days or 60 days, that will be set by the governance structure of Xcavate protocol. Then the tokens themselves are never released, and the stable coins that were used by the investors, they are returned to the investors. They're never given to the real estate developer until all of the tokens are sold. But once all the tokens are sold, that triggers an oracle to then create the SPV. So that's done through an API with Companies House in the UK, and obviously depending on which regions that we go into next, there'll be different APIs for all those regions. And then what happens is that SPV is then represented by a lawyer, independent of the real estate developer's lawyer, and then there's a multi-sig wallet where all of the information is then reviewed by the lawyers, and then once they're happy and the contracts can be exchanged, then the multi-sig wallet is signed by both parties, and then once that's signed, the tokens are then delivered to the token holders, and the stable coins are then delivered to the real estate developer, less your 1% fees, which goes to the treasury of the Xcavate protocol. And then what happens is that DAO is then represented by a letting agent that's gone through the KYC process and had their digital identity fully verified, and they're part of. In the UK, there's something called ALA, which is like a representatory body of letting agents. So once they've gone through all those checks, they can then manage the property on behalf of the property DAO, if you like, the token holders. And then the token holders can actually vote on the day-to-day running of the real estate development. What happens is the letting agent would interview people to rent the apartment on behalf of the DAO, and then the DAO holders would just vote in that they're happy that the recommended renter undertakes the rental contract, and then the day-to-day rental income would be gathered by the letting agent and then delivered, less their fees, into the treasury on behalf of the DAO, which is dispersed into all of the token holders. So we've made sure that from like start to finish, all the token holders are kept abreast and are in control of every element of what they need to be in terms of the control of that property. And when they want to realise their asset at a later date, they can then relist that asset. And another quite sort of novel idea is that we can bring into play the renter of the property as a potential asset owner. So if the token holder wants to relist that asset and the renter wants to buy into that asset, they can have first refusal for a period of time before it goes out into other token holders or the wider marketplace. So yeah, I think we've looked at what's on offer with other ecosystems, and we've tried to make it as a sort of leading the world of real estate rather than just follow other protocols and other marketplaces.
This is a brilliant but a very difficult endeavor that you are actually trying to sort of solve. And I wish you all the luck here in this. But I mean, there are so many sort of parties and so many moving parts involved in this that I just want to understand how are you sort of trying to make sure that there is no potential leak in terms of personal information. So are there any sort of zero knowledge proofs involved in making sure, like, how are you handling privacy here for each?
So that's a really good question. So in terms of personal data, so we don't hold either the protocol or the marketplace. We don't hold any personal data of any of the investors. So the way that Kilt works is that the digital identity is created by the individual. They then add various different credentials which are verified by be it Deloitte or another entity. So all of those are kept on the individual's system. They're not ever sort of held in any database that we control. And then there is the API that registers the SPV on behalf of the token holders. They are then recorded within the company's house as an investor within that limited company. But that would happen if you bought a property in the UK. That would have to happen anyway. So we're not releasing any data that wouldn't ordinarily be released. So that the token holder is fully aware of exactly where that data is going to be displayed prior to them investing in that property. But yeah, in terms of data breach, there's no real need for any zero knowledge proofs as far as we're concerned at this moment in time. But that may come into play later on, because if you look at the way in which a construction project happens, there would need to be zero knowledge proofs in terms of different milestones in terms of the construction process and access to quite sensitive data in terms of the property build. But in terms of the actual finished property and tokenizing it, also the renter, the details of the renter would never be revealed. It would always be something that is controlled by the letting agent under contract. So that we would never publish any of those details on the platform. So we're fully compliant with GDPR and privacy rules surrounding that. But yeah, I think at the moment zero knowledge proofs are on the horizon for us, but we don't need to implement it at this probably this side of this year. But we have some ideas that we're going to implement. We've spoken to the likes of Logion, which they've got a really good system for proof of law. So we're looking to maybe either team up with them and partner with them, or look at some kind of leveraging whereby we can utilize their network of verified legal entities rather than have to just a random lawyer from just that hasn't been fully vetted.
Makes sense. So I want to sort of go at it from someone who wants to use Xcavate as a customer, right? Someone who wants to actually see what a tokenized asset would look like. So what's the process if I am a customer trying to sort of use Xcavate? How does that look like?
So the idea will be that you would need your digital identity initially with verified credentials. And then once you have those, you can interact with the platform. So you would you could browse all of the different properties without having to have a digital identity and verified credentials. But if you wanted to purchase any property tokens, you would have to go through that verification process. And then the idea would be that you would find a particular property that you like the look of, that meets your investment goals, and you would be given a property price. You would be given an idea on rental yield. So you would understand exactly what kind of return on your investment that you are likely to receive. So then you would select the number of tokens that you wish to purchase. You would need to have already gone through the process of either purchasing some USDT or USDC through a normal crypto exchange.
So it's all stable coin, right? No dot.
Yeah, at this stage, we wanted to keep it to stable coins just so it's very easy and simple to follow. And then later on, we could potentially incorporate DOT and other assets. But again, the regulatory environment is still something that we need to be careful about navigating. And the regulators don't necessarily like all of the different crypto assets out there. So if we've got it as a very simple stablecoin asset that they understand, then we're more likely to get the regulatory support that we need initially. And then once we've got their confidence, then we can start introducing other assets with their approval. So that's sort of the journey that we're on at the moment. And then, the token, the property tokens, once the asset has been purchased, would then be dropped into their wallet, and then they would be able to operate and vote and communicate via a new system, a DIDCOM system that we're looking to implement as well, that verified DIDs that have these property assets can then be communicated to from the letting agent, and also communicate to the letting agent if they have any queries. Because if the letting agent is deemed to have done something that is nefarious, so maybe they've overcharged for a repair or something like that, then a token holder can actually put in a vote of no confidence into the letting agent. And if it's garnered enough support, then and the letting agent hasn't come back with a way of defending themselves and to the approval of the token holders, that actual letting agent can be voted out. So again, there's a way of either slashing the letting agent because they need to bond a certain amount of Xcav tokens, which are the native token of the Xcavate protocol, to become like an approved letting agent. Or they can be voted out, and then another letting agent would be appointed to represent that particular property DAO. I think that's where we've tried to make the control as much in the hands of the token holders. So it's not just about the property token as an asset; it's about control and something that they can leverage over time. I mean, eventually, we'd love to implement like a way of borrowing against that asset. So it'd be great to team up with the likes of Centrifuge Opportunity going forward.
Definitely. I mean, I think there are so many sort of avenues that open up after you have this sort of initial protocol in place. I think, but it also comes with its own set of challenges, I feel. So one quick question about the ownership. Does that ownership also allow you some level of sort of actually having the ownership to go stay in that property if that property is available? Kind of like how generally this sort of shared ownership thing works, right? People do it because they get to live in it for 1 month, a year, or something like that.
Not at the moment. So what we wanted to do, there's a huge demand in rental properties in the UK, in London especially. So the network of real estate developers that my co-founder Alex has got in the UK, and that's probably 70 plus real estate developers. So we've got access to thousands of properties. Whilst we're sort of bedding this whole process in, and whilst we're getting confidence with the regulators, we wanted to make sure that we're dealing with real estate developers that we can vet fully, both off chain and on chain. And then once we've fully verified that the process, the protocol is fully robust, then we can throw it out to every kind of real estate developer in the regions that we'll roll it out to. But the rental market is really strong. So we wanted to make sure that we're dealing with long-term rentals in those regions. But as I said before, the renter can buy into the property. But what we're looking to do at a later stage will be to have more sort of vacation apartments where you could buy tokens in a property and either leverage a vacation in that property or live in that property for a period of time, or leverage an income from that property. So it would be fully flexible. But at the moment, we're just making sure that we bed in the system with a long-term rental offering to our community, because I think if you go too fast and too broad without sort of bedding in everything, I think it could. There are so many moving parts that we don't want anything to fall over, so we're being very cautious about our approach and the sort of the types of offerings that we'll make available. We'll get everything robust, and then we'll ask what the community wants, and then we'll incorporate some new elements and some new offerings based on that feedback.
That makes complete sense. Yeah. So, what does the future timeline for Xcavate look like? Right. So, you are currently still working with regulators. What does the next 2 years down the line look like?
So the next sort of about 4 months is all focused on getting the regulator the approval from the FCA sandbox, and also launching a parachain slot on Polkadot. So that should be happening this year, based on us getting some community support for our fundraise on Polymech. And then next year will be about expanding the number of properties that are available in the marketplace. And then the back end of next year, we'll be looking to incorporate new regions. So we've got contacts in Madrid, in Spain, in Dubai, in Singapore, Hong Kong. We've also been talking to the Mandala chain. So, potentially we're looking at Indonesia and other parts of the Australasia area. So that's sort of the back end of next year. And then the following year will be about how we can start to build out other elements of the custom palettes to look at the land acquisition, the planning process, and the construction process to start to build out this SDK. And then we're looking to partner with a lot of other chains and make it sort of something that you can then purchase assets with most other chain agnostic assets. So I think that's really the longer term plan, and in that way, there'll be opportunity to leverage your asset across multi chains and across multi ecosystems, and that hopefully fits in with the timeline of Jam, that we could start to lead into that sort of trustless environment, that it doesn't really matter what chain you're on. There's this whole sort of wider trustless interaction between different ecosystems.
Definitely. So the parachain that you're going to sort of work on, so do you have any plans to open this up to other developers so that they can build on top of Xcavate?
Yeah, definitely. So we've built like the UI for this marketplace, and we're going to work with some agencies to try and improve the UX and UI over time. But I think what I'd love to do is have this SDK that we can reward builders by building and enhancing the SDK with different tools and different assets that the community wants to see, because whilst the initial marketplace will focus on rental properties, it may be that, we're talking with this project called Boehm, and what they do is they tokenize the whole process of construction. So you can have this amazing 3D plan of a real estate development, and then you can convert that into a 2D plan. But each individual asset, down to each nail, each screw, can be tokenized. So what we want to do is we want to build the SDK and integrate projects like that and other projects that are building around the world on different chains. I think that would be a really powerful ecosystem to build out over time. It's just a question of what are suitable projects and suitable builders that align with our goal of of having this trustless environment, that people can have an asset that they can rely on and they know they have control over. That's really where the whole protocol vision. We need to make sure that the builders are aligned with that. But yeah, we want to put on hackathons and support bug bounties and loads of other things that we've got coming up in the coming sort of 9 to 12 months, I think.
That's great. I mean, probably gives like the number of challenges that this solves. Like this opens up the opportunity for a lot of other people to also solve their own problems on top of it.
Yeah, and we're also looking to share best practice. So, other chains out there that are looking to either do something with real estate or are already doing something with real estate. If they want to learn from what we've done, we're going to be completely open source, and we'll encourage others to use our palettes and our technology, and then defining this standard, this best practice that can be rolled out, and that way assets can be more interoperable, and we haven't got this sort of monopoly like in the Web 2 environment. I think that's really important.
I feel this is something that the world really needs, to be honest. Somewhere sort of democratizing the idea of property investment, it feels like such a huge barrier to entry in that sense that it gets difficult for people to even think of that as an investment practice in that sense, right? So they shy away from doing that at all. So this just sort of gets them to at least thinking about it from a perspective of investing for a longer term return in that sense.
Well, yeah, and also, I see an opportunity with a lot of regions and countries that maybe haven't got this level of property rights that other regions and countries enjoy. I think I'd like to encourage enterprising governments to adopt, the best practice that we're trying to implement, and make sort of these opportunities available to anyone in their countries and beyond. Because I can only see it benefiting everyone. Because I think real estate is such a big market and can be used for lots of different use cases. So I see once you nail the best practice on how you tokenize and then fractionalize and market these properties to everyone in a very secure and very structured manner, which is ensuring everything's done in a decentralized way. Then it opens it up to the world, and I think governments will, once they see it working in certain regions, they'll get on board anyway. I mean, I love what the Mandala chain are doing, and I think there's only opportunity for other parts of the world to be early adopters as well, and start to level this playing field. Because you look at the world of real estate, 1% of the total number of population in the world own half the world's wealth. And a large chunk of that, like $378 trillion worth, is down to real estate. So it's a huge untapped area. And I think other protocols that have tried to control every element have not been able to scale. And I think that's been the stumbling block. Is we want to try and scale and make everyone else scale with us, and that way everyone benefits. And it's not just about this, oligarchy where the few benefit from this huge asset pool. It should be about everyone benefit, and everyone who works hard and wants to invest in something that's going to appreciate over time and give them either utility or something that they can build on. That should be available to everyone, in my view.
That is amazing. So with that, we've come to an end to this episode. It has been quite an interesting one, and I hope our listeners sort of went away with a lot of insights into how democratizing real estate essentially looks like, the hard work that goes behind it. If you've enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the AwesomeDOT Podcast. And until next time, I'm Yogesh signing off.
Thanks, Yogesh.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of AwesomeDOT. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode in the comments section or at website. The content presented on AwesomeDOT is not financial or investment advice and should not be viewed as a recommendation to support any specific project. The views expressed are the personal opinions of the podcast guest and moderator and may not necessarily be shared by AwesomeDOT. We do not endorse or guarantee the accuracy of the information provided. Want to join us as a speaker? Visit our website at awesome-dot.com to learn more. Remember to star the GitHub repo, awesome-dot. Also, you can always find us on Spotify for more great content. Have a great day. See you in the next one. Thank you.